Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. The Lighthouse Keepers Log, October 17, 2023. I never wanted to be a lighthouse keeper. The job found me during a particularly desperate stretch of unemployment after the shipping company I worked for downsized. When the position opened at Blackrock Lighthouse off the northern Maine coast, I took it without much thought. 6 months on, 6 months off. The pay was decent, the solitude appealed to me after years of office politics, and I'd always had a fondness for the sea. It's mostly automated now, the Coast Guard officer told me during my brief training. You're there for maintenance, weather reporting, and as a failsafe. The light rarely needs human intervention anymore. They didn't tell me about the ships. My name is Daniel Marlowe. I've been the keeper at Blackrock for 3 months now, and I'm recording this log because I need someone to know what's happening here. If you're reading this, I hope it's because I've safely returned to the mainland and handed this journal to the proper authorities. If not, well, I suppose it doesn't matter. The first month passed uneventfully. I settled into a routine, maintenance checks in the morning, weather readings at noon and midnight, and the rest of my time spent reading, writing, or staring out at the endless Atlantic. The lighthouse stands on a small, rocky island about 2 miles offshore. There's the main tower, of course, with my living quarters on the lower levels, and a small boathouse where I keep the motorboat for emergencies or supply runs. The solitude was peaceful at first. I'd watch fishing boats pass in the distance, cargo ships further out, their lights blinking like earthbound stars. I'd log them dutifully, more out of boredom than necessity. Modern ships don't rely on lighthouses the way they used to, but Blackrock has stood for over a century, and tradition dies hard in these parts. It was during my second month when I first saw it, the schooner. I was up late, reading in the lantern room just below the light itself. It was a clear night, full moon reflecting off the water, when movement caught my eye. A sailing vessel moving parallel to the shore, its white sails ghostly in the moonlight. What struck me as odd was the design, a 2-masted schooner that looked straight out of the 19th century. I assumed it was a replica, maybe a tourist attraction or some wealthy eccentric's toy. I noted it in my log and thought little more of it. 3 nights later, I saw it again. Same course, same time, moving silently through the water, too silently. I grabbed my binoculars for a better look and felt a chill run through me that had nothing to do with the October air. The deck was crowded with figures, but they moved with an unnatural stiffness. And though the sails were full, there was no wind that night. I radioed the Coast Guard the next morning. Any unusual vessels reported in the area. Specifically, a schooner looks like a historical replica. Negative, Blackrock, just the usual traffic. Why do you ask? I hesitated, suddenly reluctant to sound like a fool, just curious. Thought I saw something interesting last night. Could be one of those dinner cruise ships from Portland. They do historical themes sometimes. Right, probably that, but it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. The schooner appeared 5 more times over the next 2 weeks, always at night, always following the same course. I began to notice details, the weathered wood of its hull, the tattered edges of its sails, the name partially visible on its bow. Mary Celeste, that's when true unease set in. Anyone with a passing interest in maritime history knows the Mary Celeste, found adrift and abandoned in 1872. Its crew mysteriously vanished. The original was a brigantine, not a schooner, and it certainly wasn't sailing off the coast of Maine in 2023. I tried to photograph it, but my camera would malfunction each time. Battery suddenly drained or memory card corrupted. When I attempted to film it with my phone, the footage showed nothing but empty water where I knew the ship had been. Then came the night I saw the faces. It was just after midnight, a storm brewing on the horizon. The schooner appeared as usual, but closer to the lighthouse than ever before. Through my binoculars, I could make out the crew clearly now, pale, gaunt figures in outdated sailor's garb. They moved about the deck with jerky, uncoordinated motions, like marionettes with tangled strings. And then, as one, they turned toward the lighthouse, toward me. Their faces were featureless voids, smooth expanses of skin with only the suggestion of eyes, dark, hollow indentations that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I dropped the binoculars, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I found the courage to look again, the ship was gone. That night, I dreamt of drowning, of being pulled down into black depths by hands that were somehow both solid and incorporeal. I woke gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the taste of salt water in my mouth. The next day, I made an unscheduled trip to the mainland for supplies and to check the local maritime registry. The harbor master, a weathered man named Jenkins, listened to my carefully edited inquiry about historical vessels in the area. Plenty of old shipwrecks along this coast, he said, not looking up from his computer. Nature of the territory, any schooners, specifically from the late 19th century, he peered at me over reading glasses. You're the Blackrock keeper, right, Marlowe? I nodded. Seeing things out there, are you? There was no humor in his voice, just curious about the history. Jenkins studied me for a long moment before turning to a filing cabinet. He extracted a worn folder and placed it on the counter between us. These are local shipwrecks, documented from 1850 to 1950. Help yourself, but I'll save you some time. You're looking for the Eliza Jane. The name meant nothing to me. Not the Mary Celeste, he snorted. That was halfway across the Atlantic. No, the Eliza Jane went down in 1891, about 3 miles from your lighthouse. Claimed she was being followed by another vessel for days before she struck the rocks, a vessel that didn't appear in any other ship's logs. I felt cold despite the warmth of the small office. What happened to the crew? That's the thing. There were survivors, 3 of them. They claimed the phantom ship drove them onto the rocks deliberately, said its crew had no faces. Jenkins closed the folder. Local legend, mostly. Good for scaring tourists, but you don't believe it. Jenkins shrugged. Been working this harbor 40 years. Let's just say BlackRock has had more keeper turnover than any lighthouse should. People don't tend to last the full 6 months. I returned to the lighthouse that afternoon, the folder of shipwreck documents tucked under my arm. Jenkins had allowed me to make copies of the Eliza Jane records, including the survivors' testimonies. Their descriptions matched what I'd seen with disturbing accuracy: the 2-masted schooner, the faceless crew, the unnatural silence of its passage. That night I waited. The storm that had been threatening finally arrived, rain lashing against the windows, waves crashing against the rocks below. Perfect conditions for a shipwreck, a part of my mind noted grimly. The schooner didn't appear, but something else happened, something worse. The lighthouse log, kept faithfully by keepers for decades, was stored in a weatherproof cabinet in my quarters. I'd been reading through previous entries, looking for any mention of phantom ships. Most were mundane reports of weather and maintenance, but occasionally I'd find cryptic notes. It returned tonight, or they're watching again. As the storm raged, I dozed off in my chair, the log open on my lap. I woke with a start to find the pages wet, seawater dripping onto the floor though all windows were closed. And there, written in a hand not my own, in ink that glistened like fresh blood, "We guide THEM home." I slammed the log shut, heart pounding. The room suddenly felt crowded, though I was alone. The air pressure changed, my ears popping painfully. In the corner of my vision I caught a flicker of movement, a figure perhaps, or just a shadow cast by the swinging lamp overhead. The radio crackled to life, startling me so badly I knocked over my chair. "Mayday, mayday, this is the fishing vessel Northern Star. We've lost power and navigation, taking on water. Our position is approximately 2 miles east of BlackRock Lighthouse. Requesting immediate assistance." I grabbed the radio. "Northern Star, this is BlackRock Lighthouse. Coast Guard has been notified." A lie, I hadn't had time. "I can see you from my position." Another lie, in this storm visibility was near zero. "Thank God, we can see your light. We're heading toward you." Ice formed in my veins. The automated light had gone out hours ago, a power surge from the storm. I'd been meaning to switch to the backup generator, but had become distracted by the log. There was no light guiding the Northern Star. I ran to the mechanism, frantically working to restore power. Outside, the storm howled, a living thing hungry for sacrifice. When the generator finally kicked in, I raced to the observation deck, scanning the churning waters for any sign of the fishing vessel. There, a light bobbing in the waves, not the Northern Star, but a single lantern, held aloft on the deck of the schooner. It was closer than ever before, positioned directly between the failing fishing vessel and the jagged rocks that surrounded the island. "Northern Star, do not approach the light vessel. I repeat, do not approach. Adjust course immediately." Static answered me, broken by fragments of panicked voices. "Can't understand," pulling us toward, God, their faces, then nothing but the storm. I watched helpless as the Northern Star, visible now as a dark shape against the foaming sea, changed course to follow the schooner. The phantom vessel led them straight toward the most treacherous part of the reef, where waves concealed knife-sharp rocks just beneath the surface. The fishing boat's running lights suddenly tilted at a sickening angle. A grinding crash reached me even through the storm's fury. The lights flickered, went out, then flared again briefly before disappearing completely. The schooner's lantern remained, steady despite the gale, then slowly began to move away from the reef. As it turned, I saw the deck was more crowded than before. New figures moved among the faceless crew. I spent the remainder of that night making desperate calls to the Coast Guard, reporting the shipwreck, directing the search and rescue operation that began at first light. They found debris and oil slick, a few life jackets, but no survivors among the Northern Star's crew of 5. "These waters are treacherous in a storm," the Coast Guard captain told me when he visited the lighthouse to take my statement. "Even experienced sailors make mistakes." "It wasn't a mistake," I insisted. "They were led to the rocks. I saw it happen." He gave me the look I was beginning to recognize, concern mixed with skepticism, the kind reserved for those beginning to crack under pressure. "You've been out here alone for a while, Marlowe. Isolation can play tricks on the mind." "Check the logs," I said. "Previous keepers have seen it too. The schooner, the faceless crew, it's all documented." He promised to look into it, but I knew he wouldn't. Or if he did, he'd find nothing, because when I returned to my quarters after seeing him off, the cabinet where I kept the logs stood open, empty save for a small puddle of seawater on the bottom shelf. That was a week ago. Since then, the schooner has appeared every night, sailing ever closer to the lighthouse. Last night, it anchored directly offshore, close enough that I could have hit it with a thrown stone. The faceless crew stood at the railings, all turned toward my window. Among them, I recognized newer figures wearing modern fishing gear, the crew of the Northern Star. I've barricaded the doors, though I'm not sure what good it will do. Salt water seeps under the doorways each night, no matter how I try to stop it. The radio picks up voices sometimes, fragments of distress calls from ships that sank decades or centuries ago, according to the dates they sometimes mention. I've tried to leave twice. The first time, my boat's engine died halfway to shore, and the current began pulling me toward the schooner, which had appeared silently beside me. I barely made it back to the lighthouse by rowing with all my strength. The second time, the water around my boat began to boil, and hands, dozens of pale, waterlogged hands, reached up from the depths, grasping at the hull, at the oars, at me. I retreated again. The Coast Guard isn't due to check on me for another 3 months. Supply deliveries come by drone now, so there's no scheduled human contact. My satellite phone has stopped working. It connects, but whoever answers speaks in a gurgling voice that sounds like it's coming from underwater. Last night, I found a ship's manifest on my pillow, written on parchment so old it crumbled at the edges. It listed names, hundreds of them, with dates ranging from 1891 to last week. The crew of the Northern Star were the most recent entries, but there was one blank line remaining. The last entry space had no name yet, just a date, tomorrow. I understand now what the schooner is, what it does. Blackrock Lighthouse was built to prevent shipwrecks, but what if something doesn't want them prevented? What if, over the centuries, something has developed a taste for the souls of drowned sailors? "We guide THEM home," the message in the log had said, "not to safety, but to a different kind of home, an eternal crewing of that phantom vessel." The faceless ones aren't separate entities, they're aspects of the same consciousness, a collective formed from all those it has claimed. The schooner doesn't just want to add me to its collection, it wants the lighthouse itself. With no keeper, with no light, how many more ships might be lured onto the rocks? I'm writing this now because tonight will be my last at Blackrock, not because I'm escaping, that hope is gone, but because I know they're coming for me. The water is rising inside the lighthouse, seeping through sealed windows and locked doors. It's at ankle depth now and rising faster by the hour. I've tried everything, prayers, salt lines at the thresholds, iron nails hammered into the doorframes. Nothing stops the advance of the water or the whispers that come with it, promising cold peace beneath the waves. There's a scratching at the door now, not like hands, but like something being dragged across the wood. A waterlogged rope, perhaps. Or seaweed. The temperature has dropped so low I can see my breath. I keep thinking about what Jenkins said, that Blackrock has had more keeper turnover than any lighthouse should. How many of my predecessors ended up on that ship? How many blank lines have been filled with the names of those who sat where I'm sitting now? The scratching has stopped. Instead, there's a gentle knocking, 3 slow taps, repeated at regular intervals. Almost polite, like a visitor patiently waiting to be acknowledged. The water is at mid-calf now, and it's not seawater anymore. It's too dark, too thick. When I touch it, my fingers come away stained with what looks like ink but smells like blood. The knocking continues, and now there are voices, so many voices, calling my name from outside. Some sound afraid, others peaceful, but all have the same underlying hollow quality, as if speaking from the bottom of a well. I've moved to the highest point of the lighthouse, the lantern room itself. The light is still functioning, sweeping its beam across the churning waters. The schooner remains anchored offshore, but its deck is empty now. I know where its crew has gone. They're here surrounding the lighthouse, their faceless forms visible whenever the light swings around to illuminate the rocks below. The door to the lantern room is steel, securely bolted. It won't hold them for long, but perhaps long enough for me to finish this account. There's a final option I haven't tried. The lighthouse plans show an emergency shaft running from the lantern room down through the center of the structure, emerging underwater near the base. It was designed as an escape route of last resort for keepers trapped by fire. I don't know if it's still functional. These plans are from the original construction in 1887. But the hatch is here, built into the floor, heavy iron with a rusted wheel lock. The knocking has reached this door now. The metal is beginning to dent inward, impossible force being applied from the other side. Water is streaming through the seams. I've made my decision. When they break through, I won't be here. I'll take my chances with the shaft. Perhaps I can swim far enough to escape whatever force binds the faceless ones to the schooner and the rocks. Perhaps not. If anyone finds this account, know that Blackrock needs a keeper, not to maintain the light but to resist what waits offshore. It's been waiting for over a century, patient as only the dead can be, collecting souls to add to its terrible crew. The door won't hold much longer. The wheel on the shaft is turning, though I haven't touched it. They know what I'm planning. I hear singing now, a sea chanty in dozens of voices, the words just beyond comprehension. The melody is beautiful and terrible, promising rest beneath the waves. The water is rising faster, swirling around my knees, my waist. The door bulges inward with each impact, the metal shrieking in protest. I've secured this account in a waterproof case. Perhaps the currents will carry it to shore. Perhaps someone will read these words and understand. The wheel on the floor hatch has stopped turning. The hatch swings open, revealing not an escape shaft, but a vertical tunnel filled with dark water that seems to go down forever. Pale, faceless figures look up at me from the depths, arms outstretched in welcome. The lantern room door gives way with a final groan of metal. Water rushes in, a solid wall of it, impossible in its volume and force. I see them now, filing into the room, sailors from every era, their blank faces somehow conveying hunger and satisfaction simultaneously. Behind them comes a figure different from the rest, taller, older somehow, wearing a lighthouse keeper's uniform from another century. Where its face should be is a swirling darkness like a miniature whirlpool. It extends a hand to me, pale fingers elongated and webbed. In its other hand it holds a quill pen that drips dark fluid onto the floor. I understand. My name is the last to be added to the manifest. After that, Blackrock will go dark until another keeper arrives. The cycle will begin again. The figure moves closer, the darkness where its face should be beginning to take shape, to form features, my features. I have seconds left. The water is at my chest, my neck. They surround me, these lost souls, these faceless guides who bring sailors not to safety but to eternal service. The keeper thing stands before me now, pressing the quill into my hand, guiding it toward the manifest that somehow remains dry despite the flooding room. I will not sign, I will not join them willingly. The water reaches my chin. I take a final breath and dive for the open hatch in the floor, not as escape, I know now there is none, but as refusal. If I am to join the faceless crew, it will not be by my own hand. The dark water closes over my head. I feel myself being pulled down, into depths that cannot exist within the structure of the lighthouse. Hands grasp at me from all directions, cold and strong and patient. Far below, growing larger as I descend, I see lights, not the warm lights of salvation, but the cold phosphorescence of the deep sea. The outline of a ship takes shape, its two masts reaching up like grasping fingers, its hull a wound in the darkness. The Eliza Jane waits to welcome me home.